Hello, my name is Lubna Jerar Naqvi, and I'm from Karachi, Pakistan. I am a journalist for the past 30 years. And if you don't know about Pakistan, we're right between Afghanistan and India. It's an interesting place to be. We have had a lot of amazing and historical, at least for the domestic landscape, things going on with the media. And today I'm honored to moderate this wonderful panel from the region. And to tell you the truth, I'm very, very nervous right now because I mean, they have such amazing journalists in the region that it's, I mean, I feel proud to be part of this region. So we'll be discussing some trends and challenges from the region. As we know that our region is not very high on freedom of expression in media, and our media faces a lot of issues in this, in various ways, from various factors. In my country, we've had a bad, I guess we have a bad situation there. The killings of journalists has increased this year. As IFJ's Asia Pacific monitor, I also have to look at the situation and the rise in cases of assault and harassment, and now, of course, cyber harassment and threats that our journalists face in the region. And I look happy and I smile, but I'm quite scared because the situation is not as we would have, would liked it to be. So before I just take over the whole session, I'm going to open up my introductions and see who we have here today. So we have our guest from, let me just open it before I get it all wrong. So we have, and sorry if I mispronounce your name, and I'm very bad at, I can't even pronounce my own children's names, so please. So, and I think it's due to age. Of course, we have Kalafi Moala, editor of Talanoa, Tonga. He's from Tonga, and it may be an island, and we may think, oh, they may have a very nice, setup there. We'll hear from him. It'll be interesting to hear. Then, of course, we have Rihoko, Akiyama. She's a correspondent at News Department TV Tokyo in Japan. Then we have Derek Wallbank. He's the managing editor for Breaking News Bloomberg and is based in Singapore. And we have Shi-Dong Lee. He's the editor of Yonhap News TV South Korea. And of course, we were just discussing BTS, but he wasn't very impressed by our knowledge of BTS, the K-pop band. And of course, then we have our own host journalist, Howie Severino, editor at large GMA Integrated News, and he is based in Manila, Philippines. So because he's the host, I will give the podium to him first because we are his guests.
Thank you, Lubna. Magandang araw sa inyong lahat. Good afternoon. And, good morning. And aloha. I'm the only Filipino on stage, so even if I had no hand at all in organizing these three wonderful days, I feel like a local host. So since this is the last plenary panel, the last words must include thanks to all those who made this logistical challenge a success, especially the team from the East-West Center. So I'm going to read all your names, if you don't mind. Can you just stand up? If you folks are around, Ann Hartman, Susan Kreifels, Divon Grandi, Anna Reedy, Raya Sekimoto, our floor director, Jamin Laupola, Derek Farrar, Caitlin Brophy, Tasha Kakuda, and Deanna O'Brien. I was in Honolulu last March for a wedding, and I made a side trip to the East-West Center, and they were already hard at work several months ago, so I know how diligent and seriously they've taken this whole event, and it shows. Thank you so much for the careful and thorough preparation, the excellent curation of speakers and selection of speakers. Maraming salamat. You know, this is a historic conference, not least because those of you who are staying in the Sofitel Hotel are the last guests in that iconic hotel. They are closing down the hotel as soon as you all leave. Thank you for deciding to hold this conference in the Philippines so many of us Filipino journalists can attend. There are many other reasons for holding it here, not least of which is the role of our feisty press in restoring democracy in the Philippines in 1986, which triggered a democratic renaissance around the world for the next several years. But another more recent and less sanguine reason for holding it here has been mentioned, as has been mentioned a few times throughout the conference. We're considered patient zero for disinformation, the lab for spreading hate and lies by social media, now the playbook for authoritarians around the world. A cartoon crossed my feed this week of a man in front of his computer screen looking over his shoulder to his wife. "I just feel fortunate," he says gleefully, "to have so much disinformation at my fingertips." It's satire, of course, of a common internet user who gobbles up and shares information from an infinite pool of dubious sources. He has no idea whether what he's spreading is true or not, but he's probably entertained, and besides, he agrees with everything he's sharing. In a previous age, when public sources of information could still be counted, journalists were considered and took pride in being gatekeepers. Far from perfect, of course, but we were gatekeepers who were expected to apply methods of verification to ferret out facts and present them to the public. To a great extent, democracy is a human enterprise to build consensus for action based on the facts that journalists gather. That's why journalism and its gatekeeping role are seen as a pillar of democracy around the world. Any gates have disintegrated with the internet. Instead of gatekeepers, we have a riot of rumor mongers, trolls, influencers, and falsehood factories competing for eyeballs with besieged fact seekers, among them journalists. This conference offered a venue for exchanging insights on how to put facts back on a pedestal as society's lodestar. There were various sessions on how to harness artificial intelligence for the public good while guarding against its potential for great harm, how to rebuild trust, and use cutting-edge techniques to check facts. Facebook had one of its public policy managers gamely face a hall full of journalists with questions about allegedly abetting genocide in Myanmar and hosting disinformation peddlers and scam schemers. Aside from generating food for the mind, this Future of Facts meeting felt like a jamboree to build solidarity for a profession under siege. Indeed, some newsroom veterans decried a creeping irrelevance in the face of forces unleashed by new technologies. That existential crisis is forcing a rethink of the profession, including the conceit that journalists have a monopoly on the public pursuit of facts. Many journalists still don't know how to relate to another breed of player in the information space. The mostly young content creators with huge followings who do not identify as journalists, but greatly influence public opinion with often unfiltered, unedited information. Would a carefully curated selection of these influencers benefit from exposure to journalists, their tradition of public service, and the sessions on the value and methods of verification? We must hope so. But first, they need to be invited, maybe at the next conference. No longer gatekeepers, journalists must now serve as models and guides for everyone else on the best practices for fact-seeking. With our audiences shrinking and scattering to millions of niches on the internet, we better hope the multitude of new voices grabbing all the attention value the truth and know how to find it. Otherwise, that future of facts may just be wishful thinking. Thank you at mabuhay tayong lahat.
Thank you so much, Howie, and it's been a pleasure being here in your beautiful country. So I would like to ask to begin the conversation, as it is the last word, and we're getting to talk here, and we're usually asking the questions, but we can now elaborate on our whatever we want to say. So I'd like to start off from the end of the. So if you would just talk about. Sorry, me and technology. I would like to hear from you about your region, the trends and the challenges that journalists face in your country. That's Kalafi.
I come from a country called the Kingdom of Tonga. It's a kingdom in the Pacific. We only have 169 islands. Half of them are inhabited. I was visiting Texas one time, and a lady there asked me where I was from. Americans are not known for their geography, not knowledge. Anyway, I said, I'm from the Kingdom of Tonga, but I come from the biggest continent on earth. And she said, oh, you're from Africa also? I said, no, I'm from the Pacific Ocean. There are few of us, not as many, but we live in the biggest continent on earth, the biggest ocean on the planet. That's something we're proud of. That even though there are not so many of us from the Pacific, but we own one of the greatest resources on earth, ocean, the minerals, the seafood, and all of that comes with it. In terms of the trends that are happening in my country, and I believe in most of the Pacific, we've gone past the era in which many of our island nations were colonies. The big powers, mostly or all of them from the West. We've gone through an era now where there's a lot more freedom. We're trying to develop democracies in some of those countries, including mine. We just had a major reformation in 2010 in which our king was no longer appointing the government, but now Parliament was appointing the government. Major reform for us. But there is a tremendous thing that has happened in the Pacific. I feel we've had a lot more freedom than, say, compared with a lot of the Asian countries. Even though I have spent time in jail, I have been deported from my own country of birth because of the kind of reporting we did. I'm an American by citizenship, and yet was born in Tonga. My newspaper was banned from distribution in Tonga for 9 months. I ended up living in New Zealand, producing the newspaper in there, distributing among Tongans overseas. So we've had our time of difficulties in Tonga, and yet now we're experiencing a whole new freedom, not only in my country, but also in the Pacific. But there's a tremendous challenge that we're facing. And I call it's the challenge of others coming into our region seeking to control. And to control, for example, the narrative, control our own story. Rather than us telling our stories, others are trying to come in to tell our stories from their own perspective. Control what is priority, control what is important to us. I just had a meeting recently where somebody came from a Western country, and I won't mention where, and basically says, you know, we know what's good for you. And I said, well, you know, I wasn't alive at the time, but I'm sure that my grandfather heard the same thing from somebody that came in here and told us, we know what's good for you, we know what's bad for you, we'll tell you what we will do for you to benefit you. So I see a new search for control of the narrative, control of what is priority coming into our region. And it comes in the form of, while we've got this rivalry that's going on between the superpowers, namely the United States and China, in the midst of that, there is this search for control, and they're firstly trying to control the media. I see that happening all over the Pacific. And they also come in the form of money. We are a funding agency, we'll give you some money, you need to form a media association, and we will tell you what is priority and what is good for you to tell others. As a journalist for 35 years, working out of the Pacific, that's something so new. I never saw it before that's coming in. And you know, I informed some of our journalists, I said, hey, we need to study a little bit of history. And we need to look back to our past in the Pacific. And you know, I'm not a pro-Chinese person because in my young days, I used to smuggle Bibles into China because they didn't have Bibles in there. And I asked a pastor in Kunming, China one time, what do you need in the church? He said, we need Bibles. And so I organized teams from everywhere around the world to smuggle Bibles into China. And we did that for over a period of 5 years. So I'm not talking as somebody that's supporting the Chinese here because we've had experience with them. However, when we studied history, you know, I'm speaking as a Pacific person. We've never had China tested their atomic bombs in the Pacific. We've never had China invaded a Pacific island. We've never had China go into a country with a monarch and dethrone their queen, like they did in Hawaii. We've never had China take over a country. Like I was in a conference recently in University of Canterbury, and while we were talking about how bad China was and how much China, we need not be engaged with China, they were having problems in New Caledonia, emergencies in New Caledonia. And it was not with China, it was with France. So when we look at it, all the bad things that have happened in our history in the Pacific, it didn't come from China, it came from the West. The British, the Americans, the Australians, and even the poor Kiwis went into Samoa and shot one of their chiefs there and took over Samoa for a time. So all I'm saying here in this gathering, this honored gathering, I think we need to take it easy and reflect on ourselves. We need to correct some of the things that we have done. And the last thing a Pacific Islander needs to hear is a Westerner that comes in and say, do not engage with China, they're really bad for you. Continue to engage with us. We are your traditional partners. We are your traditional friends for many years. And I'll just close with this. I was just in the Marshall Islands last year in a media conference over there. I have a close friend over there, an American friend, close friend of mine, whose wife died. And he took me, his wife died from the radiation problems that they had with the testing there. We went to an area and talked to people who are still sick today, seeking medical help. And I just joked to him and I said, well, did the Chinese come by here recently? And the guy literally cried and said, no, the Chinese haven't done any testing in the Marshall Islands. So I'm just saying, can we please reflect on ourselves? I'm Western educated. I'm a citizen of a country that's the Western country. I'm calling out, let's be reflective before we start crucifying China. Can we please look at the mistakes we ourselves did in the past? Our challenge today in the Pacific is not a challenge from China. Our challenge is that we have powers that are coming in to control our narrative, control our priorities, and they're not coming from China. Mostly, they're coming from the West. I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Kalafi. And I'm sure we'll come back to you and talk about the role of media in your region and see what you can do to improve or get conversations open. I like to come to Rihoko, and you have a presentation and give your opening remarks, and then do you have a presentation? Or?
A little bit, yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me here today, and thank you to Lubna and to everyone here on the panel. That was such a powerful speech that you gave, and I want to talk on a very different topic today. So I'm an editor and correspondent of a news program called World Business Satellite. It's on 10 p.m. every day in Tokyo. If you come by in Tokyo, please see it. And I'm in charge of, it's a 54-minute program every day. And I'm in charge of selecting what's going to be on the program and how we're going to tell that news story. And it's very refreshing to be here and to be not on a deadline of 10 p.m. every night. So thank you so much again. So I have about 20 years plus experience in the field of journalism. And I just wanted to share a day that I would remember the most in this 20 years. And if you look at the picture, in the Mac. It's a screenshot, so it's not a very good picture. But it's January 6, 2021. Was any of you here in Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, I was a Washington correspondent for TV Tokyo, and I covered all of American politics in the 2020 election. And on the day of January 6, 2021, from the previous day, I was covering the Trump rally, the Stop the Steal rally. I was also at the Trump speech on that day of January 6th. I was with the Trump supporters marching onto the Capitol and eventually attacking the Capitol. So, sorry, I brought something with me. Oh, okay, so just to show you, that's January 5th, January. So I was with a bunch of Trump supporters interviewing a bunch of them on that day and from the previous day. And so what haunts me most about that day is not only the physical attacks that happened at the Capitol. You probably are, the camera crews and the technicians just placing their cameras on the Capitol grounds and being, the cameras being pretty much crushed and kicked and damaged. That's a harrowing scene, and it kind of traumatized me a little bit after that day. But what haunted me more that day was not only the physical attacks, but the words that the Trump supporters I interviewed a bunch of said. And just to give you a fresh memory of what they said 4 years ago, I just want to show you one. Now, I blurred the faces for privacy reasons. So this one man said, I am here in Washington because I know for a fact that election fraud happened. Now. And then the next lady with the Q flag, you all remember QAnon, she said, I believe the Q posts are true. There's been an active military operation called Operation QAnon. The truth will eventually be revealed by President Trump. And again, this man said, the election is stolen, and we will not give up, and we will not go away. So these were real words by the Trump supporters who eventually attacked the Capitol. And I interviewed a bunch of them, and after interviewing them, I really didn't know what facts were anymore. The whole topic of this conference is the future of facts. But the day on January 6th, I really didn't know what facts were anymore. I didn't know what the meaning of being a journalist was. And it took me a while to kind of recollect, reflect, And it's still kind of, I'm still trying to figure out the answers of what it is to be a journalist, having to uncover the facts when the facts that you report on are not believed, or there are people who do not believe the facts as facts. So, I mean, in terms of being a journalist, you believe that people are all rational, right? So when we uncover the facts, that they would know accordingly, that they would realize and kind of be informed and kind of act accordingly. But this was not the case in terms of January 6th, in terms of the whole election cycle that we had 4 years ago. So it took me, so again, the question I want to pose here is if people stop, what should journalists do when people don't believe facts as facts? Now, oh, and that's all for the slides, thank you. Now, being a journalist from Japan, I could just say this is just an American problem, that we don't have it in our society, in Japan at least. But the thing is, it was not the case. Back 4 years ago, during this whole election cycle of the 2020, we also had in Japan people who believed in conspiracy theories, who kind of promoted the words of the Trump supporters who denied the election. There were some people called them JAnon, which is Japanese QAnon theorists. And so it was a very new phenomenon that I didn't really see in previous elections, especially in the US elections. And I am, at this moment, I am wondering what these Japanese conspiracy-believing, fact-denying group is going to do this election cycle. Back 4 years ago, these fact-denying, conspiracy-believing people in Japan were seen in some parts of the media, some parts of local government, although they were all voted out in the next election, which is good, and also in the industry circles. So when you talk about fact-denying supporters who turned into a mob, it's not just an American problem. I think you'll have to watch out for it as we experience another round of elections in the United States, and I'll certainly be watching out for what will happen in Japan. So that's what I wanted to say as we approach November 5th again. And just one about the media environment in Japan. I think there's just a big problem now that we're all facing in Japan, is that it's really getting harder to attract the best people in journalism. Young people nowadays tend to focus more on work-life balance in Japan, which is a good thing, because journalists or reporters from the media industry is kind of in the opposite of work-life balance, or people seem to think so. If you go back, we were able to attract students from the best universities, the best colleges. Nowadays, it's becoming really hard to attract those kind of students in our business. And in the long run, as Japan is a very rapidly aging society, we have very few young people just going into the workforce. The fear for me now is how we keep that quality of journalists and the reports that we put out in the long run. I fear that the quality might decline or degrade, and I hope sincerely that we could put a stop to that. And that's, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you so much. That's very interesting. And talking, what is wrong with this? It's like. So I think technology is, heard my remark yesterday when I was saying that the machines are going to get us. Thank you so much, Rihoko. I like the fact that you talked about the American elections, because my country has already just gone through elections, and we saw a lot of misinformation and disinformation, and a very smart use of AI by one of our, the former Prime Minister who's been imprisoned. He was using AI from inside to hold rallies, and he was actually writing articles from inside. So it's very interesting to see the landscapes change and how misinformation and disinformation does change. And with the US coming up with their elections, it's going to be very interesting to watch that. On that note, I'd like to call Shidong. You want to come and give your opening remarks?
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. 안녕하세요. I'm Chidong Lee from South Korea's Yonhap News. Like Lubna said, I think many of you know BTS and Blackpink, but maybe not Yonhap. In Korean, Yonhap means united. Yonhap is a public news agency with also with the 24-hour television news service. Oh, so nervous. I have butterflies in my stomach. I may change my mind. I'd better sing, holding my than making a presentation in English. Anyway, throughout my career, I focused on diplomatic issues, Korean Peninsula, and global affairs. The theme of this international media conference is the future of fact. Today, I'd like to speak briefly about the future of my profession in Korea, increasingly influenced by YouTube and social media and other new platforms. Let's start with a video clip. Chacha, would you help me?
까지 이제 인도의 선거 얘기 들었을까? 인도의 경제 얘기 잠깐 드리면 현재 모디 총리의 최대 약점이 뭐냐? 바로 인도의 청년 실업률입니다.
In the clip, the YouTuber, a former investment fund manager, he discusses the latest elections in India. Guess how many subscribers he has? His channel boasts 3.5 million, a lot. So the subscribers, mostly Korean teenagers and those in their 20s and 30s. Here's another clip. Can you show another one, please?
Relationship which now allows both sides to manage differences in the West Philippine Sea so as to not allow it to hinder the rest of our fruitful engagements and multifaceted cooperation.
이런 얘기가 있어요. 이렇게 굉장히 우호적으로 출발은 그렇게 시작을 했습니다.
그랬는데 잘 지내보자고 했는데
예, 그게 2023년 1월이었어요.
네.
그런데 아까 전에 말씀드린 그 레이저 사건 있죠?
네.
This TV program is a mixture of news about South China Sea issue with entertainment. It features a professor, a comedian, and actresses. It's a clever way of grabbing attention and drawing audience. These video clips highlight changes in how international news is consumed in Korea these days. And the last clip with your face now familiar to you. Please.
을 하고 그리고 공동 기자회견도 했습니다. 핵심 메시지는 군사적으로 원팀이 되겠다.
It's from my coverage of Russian President Putin's visit to North Korea last week. This video clip demonstrates the challenges faced by traditional media, legacy media, like my organization, Yonhap News TV, television. Having that said, one positive trend is the growing interest among Koreans, especially younger generations, MGers, in global events and international news. It's evident in the popularity of the YouTube channel you just saw and infotainment programs focusing on global news. Among factors, I prepared a slide, PPT slide. Cha-cha, yes, there, good, thanks for help. Among factors are improved English skills, unlike me, easy online access to high-quality foreign news service, and tools like Google Translate and ChatGPT. Despite Korea's ethnic homogeneity, more Koreans now realize how global affairs have either direct or indirect impact on their lives, daily lives, such as inflation and even Putin's visit to Pyongyang. Change, can you change one? You have, she's got my pointer. Oh. Yes, this piece. Sorry about that. Legacy media in Korea traditionally with an emphasis on political and domestic news coverage is relatively slow to adapt to the changing needs of the audience, like Yonhap, my company. Newspapers and broadcasters remain reluctant to allocate resources for training journalists covering international news. They are also hesitant about expanding networks of correspondents abroad. In that sense, the East-West Center, EWC, has played a crucial and invaluable role, providing journalism training programs and networking opportunities, just like this conference, featuring diverse and enthusiastic attendees from around the world. Personally, this conference has been timely, refreshing my journalistic spirit and passion. Thank you all.
Thank you so. Hello. Thank you so much. So we saw the impact of digital media, and that I think we will be talking in this panel later on, because I think that's a very, very important issue that journalists need to understand. So Derek, now it's your turn. I would like to also get some, Derek, you're based in Singapore, right? But you do look at the Asia-Pacific region. So from your perspective, you're from Florida, and then you've come here. So your view of this region and the freedom of expression status in this region, I would like to hear that.
Well, thank you so much. My name's Derek Wallbank. I run breaking news for much of Asia, based out of Singapore. Before that, I was in Washington, D.C., where I ran breaking news for Bloomberg there. I started running breaking news in Washington from roughly about a month before Donald Trump came down his golden escalator. And I helped lead us as we figured out how to cover market-moving news that could be tweeted in 140 characters, sometimes designated with emojis, and all of that sort of brave new world that we have there. Currently, my region runs from New Zealand to Pakistan, excepting Greater China, Japan, and the Koreas, everything else, as well as all international news that breaks during Asia daylight hours, which is a lot. The first headlines about Russia's war in Ukraine were sent out of Asia. The start of the US-China trade war were headlines I sent from Washington. We've had our fingers on the pulse of everything that's going on. Now, I have a little bit of a unique kind of perspective in that because I do breaking news, once it crosses 15 minutes, I no longer care, and I'm on to the next thing. So I will be, reasonably brief about this, and then I'm eager to get into further discussions and also to hear your questions and try and provide some thoughts there. There's a saying in Washington that when you come to the end of a discussion, that all of the things that need to be said have been said, but not everybody has said them. And I very much feel like that here. I've really enjoyed and indeed felt privileged to listen to a lot of what's happened, come along before, hear from some people who I have known by byline, whose outlets I have read regularly, some people who are heroes of journalism, and it has been really a learning experience for me to hear from you all, and I deeply appreciate the perspectives that have been shared, and as well as hear them. And I think that's one of the greatest things about convening events like this. I would share a couple of observations, and I'll put the mic down and hear from others. The first of those observations, we talked an awful lot about geopolitical risk, and geopolitical risk is something that I do a lot. I tend to think that it's like, if I'm going to offer something in the journalism space, geopolitical risk is probably what I'm going to be dealing with. I think that we are I would observe that we are in a situation of rising geopolitical risk. I don't think that we had any dissent across that point through the entire conference. I would also observe that it may be impossible to avoid geopolitical risk. It is something that there may be still some people who are sort of trying to bury their heads in the sand and say, well, this will pass me by. I live in a safe harbor. I live in an island somewhere. I think that the broad commentary from across the region has somewhat dispelled that. And so if anyone walked into the conference with the idea that geopolitical risk was somehow going to escape them or their environment or their media organization or something, I hope that that is well and truly dispelled at this point, because that's not going to happen. The second thing is, we've talked an awful lot about change. We talked about AI, we've talked about geopolitical risk and how that goes. We've talked a lot about business model. We've talked about threats to press freedom. At the press freedom panel, I asked, and the panel agreed, that business model is a key part of press freedom. And I think that this gives us an opportunity to, amid change is both, I recently completed an MBA at the University of Illinois, and one of the things that they will tell you in any MBA course is that change is both an opportunity and a threat at the same time, right? It's disruptive, but it also provides opportunity. And it does not necessarily do so in equal measure for all people. It is both a time of great threat to a lot of existing business models. At the same time, it has never been cheaper or easier to build a following of millions with your own bespoke media organization that you can create via existing tools that you don't have to build yourself. So that's sort of where we are. What do we do in response to that? One of the things I would put forward, and one of the things that I tell students all the time when I'm talking with them and the future of the of the news media, is that I think there are two essential things that we do in journalism, right? There's a lot of unessential things that may happen, but there are two particularly essential things that we do. One is that we tell people things that they haven't heard before. We tell people something that's new, right? That's point number one. Point number two is we tell people things in a way that allows them to think differently about the world, that expands their perspective, right? Pretty much everything that's essential about what we do breaks into one of those two camps. And there's a lot of other things that maybe we can stop doing that don't fit into one of those two camps. But I do think that regardless of the changes that are coming at the profession externally, internally, via new technologies, whatever it may be, those two things really do hold, right? There is still always a market for you didn't know this and now you do. There is always a market for let me tell you something in a way that allows you to think differently. And so the core of why we do what we do stands.
Thank you so much. Captivating. coming on that, we had a discussion yesterday, and we were talking about the money behind everything. In many countries, we're seeing media being affected by that, and the role of the editor getting very weak in certain areas. And then the digital media also breaking barriers and pushing back journalists who were unwilling or unable to come onto those platforms, and creating vacuum for news and maybe helping misinformation and disinformation taking place, or non-journalists getting their voices and impact using digital tools. So I would like to hear all of your opinions on what we should do for the future. And somebody was saying yesterday that a certain journalists, younger journalists, the situation of the media in their country is so bad that they don't want to continue in that position. So being a very, very vibrant region, but still facing a lot of issues in various ways, I would like to hear each of you comment on that, and whoever wants to start. Kalafi, do you want to start on that?
Yes. Very important. Money is very important. We need money to get things done. But also looking at it from another perspective, one of the things, the trends that I'm finding out in the Pacific, money can also be used as a manipulating tool to manipulate the narrative, as I said earlier, to manipulate people to be able to live dependent on you. And so it's interesting that we have a lot more funding agencies existing today that are coming into the region, and when I say region, into the Pacific, than we've had before. They come in, there's a new term, at least for us in the Pacific coming up, it's called development partners. It used to be just partners, now it's development partners. And that word development is so loaded. We've got the money to do it, and we'll develop it the way we think you should develop. Essentially what I'm saying here is that I think we have not been given enough time and chance to express our own voice from the Pacific, and that's part of the trends and the difficulties that we're going through. Let's just look at something here that's pretty minor. Well, minor to some people, it's not minor to us. At this very conference, we've had two terms that define our region. Some people talk about Asia-Pacific, and then we have also this other term called Indo-Pacific. And I'm sitting back there with some of my fellow islanders, and we thought, wow, when did that change from Asia-Pacific into Indo-Pacific? And I said to my Fijian friend, did you ever get a letter to say that we've changed your name from Asia to Indo-Pacific? So these are new things that we didn't know. All of a sudden, it's just imposed on us. And I think this is the kind of things, the struggles that we're going through. And yes, we acknowledge the reality of the geopolitical tension and all that comes with it, the reality of the fact that we need funding, we need money, we need to build our capacity to do things. But somewhere there in the background, we want our voices heard. We want our narratives and our stories be told. We don't want to have the control being imposed on us. That we'll change your name when we feel it's convenient for us to change it, and or we will set up a program for you, And so with that, I think there is the new threat to me is a threat of recolonization in a different way. It's no longer a force coming in to conquer. It's a force coming in with lots of money and lots of tools to control. And if we can just control you, we don't need to conquer you because we've already conquered you. And so, to me, for us journalists and for media in the Pacific, that's the biggest challenge we're facing. And therefore, with all the fears about AI and all of that, we won't have our story told properly. And the realities and the truth and the facts that we are facing won't be told because others that don't live in our area Others, they don't know what the issues in the Pacific are coming in and telling our stories and controlling. Even a thing like trade. Let me give you an example. I did a story one time. I went over to the northern islands of Tonga, where fishing is a main occupation. And I found a family there who they fish, and I said to this guy, what do you do with your fish? He says, oh, I take it down and I sell it to a company here to export the fish. And this guy goes out fishing every single day. And he said, we get the money, we pay the electricity, pay for the kids' schooling and so on. And I said, what do you do with the money? He said, oh, we buy food. And so I found out that the guy, after getting the money from selling his fresh fish, comes back through the little store, convenience store, and buys tin fish that is made from the country that he's selling the fish to. And that's what he has for his meal, you know. And I thought, wow, that's a new way of twisting trade and economic development. And in Tonga, we have another issue. And not only in Tonga, in the Pacific, it is a health issue. The top 10 nations, fattest nation in the world dealing with obesity are all in the Pacific. And I'm not saying that that's from eating tin fish, but definitely it's not from eating fresh. It's fresh fish that we're missing eating. So there's a lot of complexities there, my friends, in terms of the kind of messages and information that we're delivering, decisions that we're making. It's far more complex than what you see out there. And I'm just calling out here as a Pacific Island, please don't ignore us. We may be small, we may be not that significant. We still live in the biggest planet on Earth, and we still have a story to tell. We still have voices to be heard. And we're calling out to you, our so-called development partners, to be more conscious of that.
Thank you so much. And when we were being introduced, I was like, oh, he's the silent one, let him talk. But he has so much and powerful words to share. Thank you so much for that. Coming to Howie. So we would like you.
Well, thank you. Well, you know, technology has disrupted everything, and everyone is grappling with the way forward, including legacy companies like ours. But I also wear another hat here, which is I'm also the chair of the board of editors of the Philippine Center of Investigative Journalism. It's a small nonprofit, the oldest investigative journalism organization in Asia, and it's had a lot more leeway. Because it's a nonprofit, it's not depending on ratings or advertising. It's got a lot more leeway for innovation, and it's actually we've actually tried to raise questions in a lot of our training and rethink the whole journalism model, because for the longest time, I mean, I'm an analog native actually, along with some of you. I started before the internet. When people's attention was really concentrated and we could legitimately call ourselves gatekeepers. Basically, a journalist back then was defined by your credentials. You know, if you were affiliated with a established, credible media company or organization, you were a journalist, right? But these days, you know, those definitions no longer apply, and I think we need to redefine or rethink what journalist means. Because sometimes I ask at forums here in the Philippines, like student forums, I mean, what is a journalist? And people have a hard time defining it, because unlike other professions in the Philippines, we are not licensed by the government. I mean, you can only call yourself a physician or a lawyer if you pass a board exam and you're licensed by the government, and the government can take away your license to practice. There's no such thing in the Philippines, because you know, we have press freedom is enshrined in our constitution, and you know, part of that deal is, you know, government shouldn't be regulating us so much. But I've thought about that question, what is a journalist? And basically my answer, the way I answer that to myself is, a journalist is someone engaged in the practice of journalism. And of course, that begs the question, I mean, what is journalism these days? Especially if you're not affiliated with an established journalism company or media organization. Well, because there's so many out there who are not affiliated with. In fact, they're on their own very often, and yet they want to be given credentials. They want to be part of the presidential press corps, et cetera, even if they're not affiliated with a big media company like ours. But so the way I define it now is journalism is the process of gathering facts, but with an edited process. And following certain standards and guidelines, right? So it's not just somebody who is live streaming a press conference, or not somebody who's just blogging away. I mean, it's something like someone engaged in the practice of journalism, to me, is subjecting himself to, or herself, to peer review, if you're an academic, right? So, and freelancers. That's why they can call themselves journalists, because they report to an editor. And that's basically the crux of what I was saying earlier about how journalists should start reaching out, or our profession should start reaching out to all of these, whatever you call them, content creators, influencers, vloggers, social media communicators, who are not all trolls. They're not all spreaders of fake news. Some of them are actually sincere about wanting to find facts and present the truth. They just don't have the training. They still don't have the discipline. And I think what's needed is more collaboration and cooperation, rather than, because I know a lot of old school journalists who kind of have a condescending attitude towards a lot of these solo operators that you see covering rallies and events with their iPhones and vlogging, etc. Now, imagine if this whole army out there, if just a few of them got training at journalism institutes, if they were invited to conferences like this, etc., and were exposed to journalists who have worked for decades with certain standards. I think that's the future of our craft and our profession, is if we widen the pool of people. We may not necessarily call them journalists, but just people who are engaged in the craft of journalism, which is an edited process following standards of ethics and editorial guidelines.
So I didn't know we only have a little time left. We want to go quickly to the three panelists, and then we will go to questions. This is what you get when you have journalists on the panel. Derek?
I'll just be really quick on this, following up on that point. I concern myself a lot with what moves markets. When we come to the U.S. election, the call of the races that's going to happen, people are going to try and anticipate that. And one of the things that they're going to do, the New York Times has this product called The Needle, where they sort of anticipate where things are going to be coming on. Markets are going to move off of that, right? When you have somebody who comes on in a moment of crisis in COVID, one of the biggest sources of information was a guy who started up who had a Twitter account. Twitter account, I think, was Tripperhead, and he had some of the best information on what was going on with COVID in Hong Kong, right? The information is going to come from a lot of different places, and that is just a fact of life. It's not worth debating. It is simply it is, and so we simply have to respond to that. And so I think that there is not an opening to construct a fainting couch about that. We just simply have to get on with it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Briefly, Sridhar.
Yes, of course, fighting misinformation and disinformation is a super important issue. You talked about press freedom in Pakistan. I think South Korea has a relatively good track record of press freedom, but I can't say that there is no problem at all. It's a diverse society and politically divided, ideologically split because of North Korea. But like we said, there is a probably new media like YouTube and social media networks are kind of a hotbed of fake news spreading. But I think a bigger problem in Korea, my country, is that major media is losing public trust, public confidence. So there is a bigger problem. That's just one reason. Maybe major news company, newspapers who are broadcasters, they are commercial, so they have to care about daily businesses, not investing in long-term project or, like I said, training journalists from the longer-term perspective. But actually, for me, I can't just complain and whining about the management or those kind of things briefly. That's why I just try to study more, stay humbler, and try to maintain a balanced perspective. That's all I can do.
Rihoko, please.
The biggest challenge for us is, like many of you face, budget constraints. Our advertising sales are pretty much, on a downward scale. It's not going up, and that means less, budget for the news department and for us to go overseas and cover the news as it is happening. We must rely more and more on Bloomberg or Reuters or AP, and as I said before, the quality of journalists going out there and seeing the fact for themselves, that opportunity is declining for us. And in the longer term, it might be a big challenge that we face in the Japanese media.
Oh, that was brief. Thank you so much. We only have a few minutes. If anybody wants to ask any questions, now is your chance. Oh my God, you guys, get hold on to your minds. Is it working?
I think so.
Rihoko, do you want to?
My question is for Kalafi, and I take on board what you're saying. Take it easy and reflect on everything that's happened before this moment in time. But you did talk about great power rivalry, or touch on great power rivalry, and you did talk about the frontier being control of the media. May I ask you, what are you seeing? What's different, and who are the players?
Can you just say the last sentence there, because I think I missed it.
Okay. You talked about what you're seeing is the new frontier at the moment is control of the media. Can I ask you what you're seeing from development partners and who they are, and what I suppose I'm asking about China, who's wanting to control the media in your country? Who are the players?
I think this is a fact. We've had many years in the Pacific in which the United States basically not withdrawn, but basically looked the other way from what's happening in the Pacific. For example, one of the greatest programs the U.S. did in the Pacific was the Peace Corps. And Tonga was a beneficiary. Fantastic work they did. And then the Peace Corps basically was withdrawn from Tonga for a number of years. Now they're back. Now there's an American embassy established in Tonga. Even the Solomon Islands have a new embassy. So there's a new engagement from the United States. Thank China for doing that, And so this new engagement, I think, needs to be managed very, very carefully. And it's up to the United States and its partners with Australia and New Zealand to really walk that pathway. It's not so much you come to our territory, which is the Pacific, to do your rivalry there. I had a villager told me, why don't they go and fight somewhere else? Why come to our backyard and do it there? But that's a reality that's happening with us. So I'm just saying that that's the new challenge. It's the seek for control. And the control of media is very important to those that are in rivalry. The Chinese are doing the same thing, basically. But if you can control the information, if you can control the story and the narrative, then, wow, people can therefore rise up and choose who to follow, who to take sides with. I think that's the issue that we're dealing with right now. And there's a lot of money involved. They're coming in with a lot of money, a lot of grants, a lot of things to help build the capacity of media. They're not doing that in media also. Let me just mention one thing. They're doing that with the academic world even. I mean, interesting that we're finding out academics now in the Pacific and key universities that are now being controlled to think in a certain way and to do things in a certain way. And I'll just give you a final example here. I was in a thing recently at the university where it's supposed to be a research on something having to do with China. But you know, those guys have already reached the conclusion before they even did the research. In other words, they said, this is where we're going, this is the destination, and let's do some research, find out the facts that will prove that our conclusion is true. And I myself, who have had some academic dealings, and I thought, wow, that's very unacademic. So I'm seeing, as a journalist, not only the search for control of media, control of the academic world, control of the business world, in order to be able to control society. And that's why I say it's a new recolonization of our Pacific Islands.
Thank you so much. We're officially out of time, but so quickly and briefly. Yeah. So if you could just briefly give your questions and we could briefly reply. Thank you.
We were talking about citizen journalists. Right now, all we need to become a media is just prepare a WhatsApp message and start posting it on social media. So is it, from the place where I come, there are hundreds of such media houses. So is it a good trend or a dangerous trend?
Are you asking any particular panelist?
Yeah. Sir.
Well, as someone who started out in legacy media, and I feel like I thrived in legacy media, I don't think it's a great trend, but it's like opposing the dawn. It's there, and we just have to adapt to it. We have to make, we have to figure it out. We have to figure out, to me, part of the solution is to make more of the people out there just posting on social media think more like journalists. Value the truth, value facts and evidence, and give them skills to find evidence and facts and be more responsible about how you use the new power in their hands. I think we don't have I don't think we have a choice.
Hi, I'm Mr. Sabze. I'm from Pakistan, Peshawar. Our teacher says and taught us that if you want to cover a story, you first your life is important. But when we working in such an area, conflicted area, the international organization gave us very difficult stories, and that is also life threats as well. So far, 7 journalists killed in Pakistan, 224, and yesterday one of our colleagues was also killed. So we are facing really threats. In such a circumstances, what is the real journalist challenges and what the organization future, everyone is just doing journalism here in Pakistan.
Question क्या है आपका?
Question यही है कि जो future क्या है हमारा journalist का और organization का.
So Pakistan में region?
Yeah, Pakistan.
Okay. So he's saying that because Pakistani journalists work in a very dangerous areas, how do they cope with it and what is their future?
I think you've outlined obviously the risks there, and one of the things that I would say to people who are in those sorts of situations is you can do your bit, and that's good, right? There is this temptation that some people will have to say, you have to do absolutely everything, and you have to do your bit. Make the world a little bit better than it was before. That is progress, right? Moving forward is progress. One step forward is progress. You will have your own consideration. And look, we go across this region. I look across my region, and I go to that World Press Freedom Index, and I have 2 countries that are rated anything better than problematic, right? I understand full well the realities. My eyes are open to them. I think it's good to do your bit. I really do. So I would encourage you. I would encourage you in that direction, mindful of the risks that you have laid out.
Yes.
Hi, I'm John Neri from the Philippines. My question is for the quiet guy on the panel, Kalafi. I thought it was very interesting that you highlighted the use of the term Indo-Pacific. The ability to redefine terms is a real power. Of course, this is also proof of the power, the political hegemony of the United States together with Japan and so on. But I also noticed that you want to redefine a particular term. You call yourself belonging to the largest continent, the Pacific, which is obviously an overturning of a geological definition. My question is, let's say we agree with you. Let's redefine the Pacific as a continent. What can we do to make that happen? I'm hoping that by answering this question, you can help show us the way. How do we fight back against, the larger powers?
So we have less than 30 seconds, so you have to be very brief. You can talk to them over lunch, I suppose. Yeah.
I think this is where the real role of media comes in. And one of media's role is to be a watchdog, basic role, and to speak truth to power. It's good to have these powerful people, but we need to speak truth to power, not only locally, but regionally and internationally. And we need to share from our own perspective, from our own issues and situations, what our concerns are.
Time up.
Actually, we'll just give our panel a round of applause. Thank you.